Hey, welcome class. So today's video, you're probably going to have it up on the board, or you might be watching on your Chromebooks. If it's up on the board, if everything's working the way that hopefully it's meant to, if you're watching it, I'm going to be going pretty fast. So if you are at a point where, as a teacher, feel free, you can pause it. If you're like, hey, this seems like a time where you should stop and write stuff down. If you need more time, just raise your hand and let them know, hey, I just need a couple more seconds to write something down. Today, 1.6 functions and their zeros. I say functions because the first thing that we're going to do is hop back to the homework from last class. And we're going to stop and just kind of look through that, go through some of the problems. Please excuse if you can hear my dog. She's chasing her tail at my feet. We're going to stop and go through it because I got a few emails. And typically my rule of thumb is when I get one email, there's probably 10 to 15 people who are just as confused, who are stuck and just aren't telling me that. So we're going to take a look at that real quick, look at a few problems. We're going to look at question one. Now, when we're looking at these questions, it's important to think about where you're stuck right now. If you are stuck you're looking at a paper and it is blank and you have done none of these problems, you need to ask yourself, is that getting you closer to your goal of passing this class? And if you're like, hey, I was sick, I just got the paper, that's fine. That is a reasonable reason to have not done anything. But if you looked at this problem and you're just like, I don't know what to do, that's not reasonable. That is not getting you closer to your goal. Now, hopefully, you all have hobbies and you have things that you like to do that are not school related. But what we're trying to learn here is the skills that will benefit you in those tasks. So, for instance, I love shooting my bow. I love it. Pretty much anything where you're firing a projectile and trying to hit a target a long ways off, I think is fun, and I love doing it. But in order to get good at that, you have to be willing to look like an idiot. And believe me, I have shot my bow a lot. I have missed tremendously. I remember one day I was out shooting in my parents' yard and I fired this arrow. I still can't tell you where that thing went. I never found it. All I heard was a ting of it hitting off the roof, the metal roof of the barn. I don't know if it went through the roof. I don't know if it just ramped off and launched all the way into the ether. I have no idea. And you know what? I'm embarrassed and I can't believe that I'm telling you this. But I'm sure that you feel the same way about math. You're probably at times sitting there going, oh my God, why? I should know how to do this. We totally did this in Algebra 1. And one of the first things to do is to say, hey, did we look at this in our notes? Could I go to my notes and copy down exactly how to do this? And hopefully you can say, yes, we did this in our notes. And in fact, this is what we did. We just took f of 3 is saying put 3 as the x value. And hey, now this looks like something I'm a little more comfortable with. And we can ask ourselves, what is negative 3 times 3? Well, it's negative 9 minus 2. Negative 9 minus 2 is negative 11. So when we're looking at this, in reality, once we get started, it's not super hard. But that hardest part is getting started. It is being willing to say, hey, I might get this wrong, but I'm going to look at my notes and I'm going to do my best to do the problem in spite of the fact that I might get it wrong. And you know what the worst case scenario is if you get it wrong? You erase. So make sure if you're looking at your homework and you're like, I did not try this with the willingness of knowing that I could get it wrong, hey, congratulations. We're very early in the year. You have time to try. And you know what? It's part of why I don't grade based on correctness for homework. For homework, I care that you did it and that you tried. And I expect and hope that what you're going to do is come in and ask and double check with your friends and see, hey, does this look right? Or maybe come in and ask me, because you know what? I have answer keys to every homework assignment sitting on my desk. all the time, just waiting for people to come in and say, hey, can we talk about question 3? So make sure if you are feeling stuck, come in and talk to me. Now let's take a look at question 4, where we're stepping up that difficulty just a little bit. And by just a little bit, I mean we're just making it a quadratic. But it's exactly the same process. Nothing has changed. We are still just doing h of 2 and plugging in 2. 2 squared minus 5 times 2 plus 7. 2 squared is 4 minus 5 times 2 is 10 plus 7. And you can choose to do this however you want. Personally, I look at what is 4 plus 7. Well, that's 11. 11 minus 10 is 1. And at this point, hopefully you're starting to roll with it and you're like, yes, this is feeling good. I'm feeling confident. If you're not, what should you be doing? You should not be sitting there going, man, this is way too hard. I should drop out of this class. Because 1, the drop deadline was on Friday. But 2, if you're still in this class, if we have not had a moment where we had a conversation where I maybe told you, hey, you might want to look at doing transitional algebra because I think you're going to struggle here. If we didn't have that conversation, then implicitly the conversation I have for you right now that I'm kind of corporately telling all of you is, you can do this. It might take a lot of work, but that's what makes it interesting, is the fact that it might be hard. In fact, let me tell you, taking a math class that you know how to do everything and it's super easy is really boring. And I don't recommend it, ever. You want to look at problems like this one, where maybe you're insecure and you are not very good with fractions. Great. Take advantage of it. This is where you have an opportunity to grow and to develop the skills necessary to look at problems that you maybe don't want to do and do them anyways. Because you know what's going to happen at your job? You're going to have to do a bunch of problems that you don't want to deal with and that you think are a complete waste of time. I certainly think this one is not a waste of time, because in reality, lines are everywhere. And especially functions like this, putting things in, is all over the place. So we just plug it in and we ask ourselves, okay, how do we simplify this thing? We use some blue pen over here. We first ask ourselves, what is negative 12 going to do when we multiply it, by anything negative? What's a negative times a negative? It's positive. What is 12 divided by 4? It's 3. What is 3 times 3? 9. So what do we get for our answer? Positive 10. All right, now for the substitute, please finger vote. How you feeling? 1. I've been asleep the whole time. I'm not barely even paying attention. 5. This is so easy. I'm already finished with this assignment. I'm ready for the next one. And kind of fill in between there. And part of this today, I'm not there to judge. But it's good for you to have that moment of admittance of saying, hey, I'm a 2. And that's okay. If you're a 2, great. You got a lot of room to improve, which is nice. But that's only going to get better if you do one of a few things. 1, come talk to me. I'm not that scary. 2, go on YouTube and watch whatever videos. Usually if you take and type in the punchline of whatever we're doing, even if you just type in the questions we're working on, it will give you videos of people talking about it. But you got to make sure, if you are struggling, you need to go about getting help. Especially because the questions are not really going to get much easier as we go forward. We're going to build from here, that this is now the baseline of what we expect. And absolute value functions we'll be talking about even more here this next week. But for starters, we don't need to know what they do. We can just say, okay, I plug in stuff. I can simplify things. The absolute value of 1 minus 7, because 7 times 1 is 7. Absolute value 1 minus 7 is negative 6. And what do absolute value bars do? Well, they say, what is the distance this value is from 0? Well, negative 6 is 6 units away. So, when we're looking at this thing, absolute value bars, not as scary as I think. They always feel scary at first until you realize how simple it is. Just get rid of the negative sign. If there's not a negative sign, great. Don't do anything. Just leave it alone. Just get rid of the absolute value bars. All right, one more here. And this one, I would say, is probably the point where if you did everything else and you just got down to here and you thought, hey, this feels great, this is not feeling too bad, and then you saw question 13 and went, what? Great, you're in a good position. But keep in mind, has anything changed as we've gone through these questions? From question 1 to question 4 to question 7 to question 10, have we changed anything about the process with which we are approaching these problems? Hopefully, you're all going no. So, let's change absolutely nothing about what we are doing here. So, f of 4c equals 8 minus 5 times 4c. And we just plug it in and we see what happens when we're dealing with this thing. So, now, why would we do something like this? Well, say, for instance, just based on this 4c, and I don't state that this question, this story is perfectly accurate, but fits the details. Say that this equation, f of x, is a function for, say, the caloric effect of eating, I think it's celery. Celery, I believe, takes more calories to burn in your body than it actually provides. Well, celery is mostly carbohydrates, and carbohydrates have about 4 calories per gram that you eat. So if you had these two ideas of the amount of energy you're going to burn off of it and how many calories you consume, well, you could track those two equations if you want, or you could take and plug this in, and you could just get one new equation where you just plug in the amount of grams that you eat, and it tells you the caloric output in the end, which in this case will likely be negative. So then we just simplify. 8 minus, what is 5 times 4c? 20c. And boom, that's it. That's all we're doing here in this situation. So that is the front side. I assume, based on most of my conversations with the other class periods, you probably didn't feel too bad about this side. The side you likely struggled with was over here, and I want to look at question 19. So all I did here, I just rewrote this up here so that we have those two equations. Now, you're going to have to forgive me. This is not as much of a call and response activity. I'll ask some rhetorical questions, but you're probably just going to get the answer pretty quick. Let's think about, if I were talking to you about some stuff and I was like, hey, what's an F-150? Well, conceptually, you'd be like, it's a truck. That's good enough to describe it. Hey, what does Crumbl sell? Cookies. That a lot of times we need to step back and we need to look at the concepts of things. So before we even plug anything into this question, let's first ask ourselves, what is 1/2? And a lot of answers are going to be, well, it's 0.5. Well, that's just a synonym. That's not really giving me any more information. Conceptually, 1/2 is just a number. And same thing with g of 6. G of -6 is just a number. It's a weird looking number, but it's just saying plug -6 in for x, which is going to give you a number. And what about f of -2? Same thing. It's just a number. So really this question is going to come down to, can you multiply one number by another? Then can you add something to that number? And hopefully when I break it down like that, you're like, that is so easy. So now there's a saying in your syllabus on that page that you should have cut off the bottom and signed and turned in. If you haven't, throw that in the turn-in basket on my desk and I'll pick that up at some point. Hopefully you saw the phrase, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And this is a really important idea. We want to go slow at first. Eventually, yes, can you just type this entire thing into your calculator and get an answer instantly? Yeah, we're not there yet. So, same thing as the front side. We're just putting it into multiple steps now. What is g of -6? Well, that's 14 minus 2/3 times -6. And let's simplify. Negative times a negative is positive. 6 divided by 3 is 2. What is 2 times 2? It's 4. What is 4 plus 14? 18. So now over here, I'm just going to write this in black. We have 1/2 times 18, and I've got to get this f of -2. I'm just going to plug -2 in. Don't forget, this negative out front is unrelated to the -2. So -2 squared plus 8 times -2 minus 11. -2 squared is 4, but that's still negative. So -4 minus 16 minus 11. Combine all these, get -20 minus 11 is -31. So plus a negative is just subtracting it, so minus 31. Now stop for a moment, look at this, make sure, okay, does everything feel right? If you're looking at it, double check, hey, do I agree with everything? If you don't, turn and talk to a neighbor. Say, hey, can you walk me through maybe how this happened? One of the greatest resources you have is those around you. Hopefully you come to the conclusion that yes, this is in fact right. What is 1/2 of 18? 9. So we've got 9 minus 31. You should end up with -22. So that is kind of that top section. Make sure if you're struggling with this, once again, please come in to office hours so we can get that taken care of and we can make sure that everything is making sense. Now, there's one more question on the homework I want to look at, and that is down here, question 22. And this one is going to be really important to what we are doing in the notes for today. So, whenever we see something like this, this is relying on what is called the transitive property, where we say that if A equals B and A equals C, well, then it's logical to say that B equals C, because A and B are the same thing and A and C are the same thing, so therefore B and C have to be the same. So we're going to use this here. in order to say that p of x equals x plus 7 divided by 3, and p of x equals 13. So 13 equals x plus 7 over 3. And then just solve for x. So we multiply by 3 on both sides. We subtract 7 on both sides. And get that x equals 32. Now, this is the skill that we're going to be rolling over into today's lesson. So, go ahead, put this assignment away. This is not due today. This one's being extended. This one and the assignment from today will both be due next class period when I see you. So, go ahead, scroll back to your notes, and go ahead and write down this question. What are zeros? Well, zeros graphically are the points where you cross the x-axis, and algebraically, they are the points where f of x equals 0. And then you should hopefully remember from our first lesson, and keep in the back of your mind, do you know those vocab terms from lesson 1.1? If you don't, you might want to be studying them. Because we already talked about zeros, and we said that there are a few different names for them. I will primarily be using zeros and roots to talk about them. Kind of the more clinical way of talking about them is x-intercepts. I will only really use that if I'm desperately trying to just get someone to answer the question. And solutions is more of the engineering question or answer, because a lot of times for them, the only part of a function they care about is the solutions or the roots. So to them, they just label it, that's the solutions. It's like there's a whole function out there beyond it. So go ahead, take a moment, pause the video, make sure you get these things written down in your notes. It will be majorly important. All right, now let's take a look at a few of these questions. So first off, we're going to start by finding the roots graphically. And finding them graphically is a really easy skill. So I want you to take your finger and draw this picture in your notes. You can pause the video real fast and draw that. But once you have it drawn, and really all you need is just the axes and the hash marks with the line, put your finger where the line crosses the x-axis. Right there. So that's skill number 1. Can you point at where two lines cross, where the x-axis and the line that we're graphing cross? Secondly, do you know the coordinate point of that? And hopefully you do, because it's how you found your seats in my class. So that is the point over 2, up 0. Now, important note, zeros are points. Therefore, we should write them as such. This is one of the times where there happens a lot where I'm really strict and Miss Cottrell kind of talks me down, says, hey, you're being a little too harsh. This is one of the times where it's the opposite, where Miss Cottrell is majorly devoted to it is a coordinate point. Your answer should be a point. If you're watching videos, you might see answers like this, x equals 2. Now, historically, this one has been worth half points. So keep that in mind. Where I have my nitpicking, I would dock this graph. Those arrows don't make it off. This graph to me is not good. This is Miss Cottrell's thing like that. So our skills, can we point at where the line crosses the axis? 2, can we name that point? So let's take this up a step harder and look at this one. Now we have a quadratic. Kind of the similar patterns before. Is anything really changing? No. Except for now, you've got 0.1 and 0.2. So, -2, 0, and 1, 0. You just got 2 points. So nothing has majorly changed here. Now, you want to see as hard as this gets? Go ahead and pause if you're still catching up and still writing stuff. As hard as it gets, what happens when we have this weird cubic function? Did we change anything we've been doing? No. We just find where it crosses. So here we've got 3 points, -5, 0, and 0, 0, and 3, 0. And feel free, if you want, you can always write out and between them if you prefer. But this is dealing with them graphically. Your homework is going to consist of 2 parts, solving graphically and algebraically. Now this comes back to that definition that we just wrote down on the first page. If we're finding a 0, we know that f of x equals 0. In other words, the output is 0. So, same thing we were doing earlier, by that transitive property, 0 equals 4x minus 8. It's all for x. So we're going to add 8 to both sides. 4 times what is 8? It's 2. So this tells me that my coordinate is the point over 2 up 0. And this is our answer. Hopefully you're sitting there going, wow, that was surprisingly easy. And that's my hope. This is all you're doing on this assignment. So let's go ahead. Let's look at one more real quick. And then you'll get your homework assignment. It's a gold sheet. So we know f of x equals 0. 0 equals -2/5 x plus 4. Subtract 4 from both sides. And here, this is saying multiply by -2 and divide by 5. So the opposite is multiplying by 5. -20 equals -2x. Dividing by -2 gives us x equals +10. So our answer is 10, 0. So make sure, if you're struggling with this, come into office hours and get some help. But ideally, hopefully, if you're working with some friends here with the rest of class, you should be able to knock out a little bit of this assignment. On your assignment, go ahead on the bottom, and you can do this depending on how you're feeling. If you're a little stressed, do it a little bit more thoroughly. Scribble out this bottom section. Questions 13 through 18, get rid of them. And please use the rest of class wisely. Remember, no cell phones out. This is a time that I'm giving you to work on your assignments, both the pink sheet from last class and this gold one. If you're missing some other assignment, you can work on that, and you can come into office hours and make sure you turn those into me sometime. Have a great rest of your day.